Andrew Jay travels the world talking about change and global business trends. And has this for reference on his website. Nelson Mandela described him as a national treasure. He's a change agent, which makes me think he should probably be in a Mission Impossible film. But he'll explain what it is now. Please welcome Speaker Magazine Speaker of the Year, Michael Jackson.
What a pleasure to be with you, ladies and gentlemen, in this stunning venue of Budapest, to talk about change in the midst of everything that's going on around us. As you heard by way of introduction, I've studied change most of my life. My role here, John asked me to come through and give you a sense of a little bit of a glimpse into the future that we can take away at a practical level and start thinking as what comes down the line for us in terms of our respective businesses and indeed our own personal lives. I've been privileged to work on strategy, on change with people like Richard Branson, who I worked with for 2 years, with Bill Gates over at Microsoft, and a whole bunch of other people that you haven't heard of as well. And kind of what I've learned along my journey is what I hope to share with you a little bit today. Our parents and our grandparents lived, I guess, in a time of change for them, but today it's a change of era, not an era of change. And if we look back and see where the story came from, I want to go back and look at the birth of personal computing. We've talked about it here on stage with expert presenters this morning. And the real decade of personal computing was in the 1970s. Let me beg your indulgence and go back a few months before the 70s began to July of 1969, when the world's biggest engineering feat had occurred, stopped the planet literally in its tracks as the world watched on some grainy television pictures of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landing on the surface of the moon. NASA boasted that the world's biggest supercomputer that was going to help put man on the moon had an astonishing 6 megabytes. The Eagle landing craft there had 64 kilobits of onboard computing. And that was at the end of the 60s as the decade of personal computing began. Today, if you've got a toaster in your kitchen that knows the difference between frozen bread and unfrozen bread and can still produce a toasted result, your kitchen toaster has more computing power than Mission Control. That's how much things have changed. So we can see how technology has unfolded. Let's move beyond the 70s now into the 80s, and when we got computers, we also wanted to talk to each other more, and the era of communication in the modern sense began. They say you touch your average smart device 186 times a day, maximum of those 7 to 8 times will be actually for a phone call. We wanted it all now, collaboration, absolutely everything. We've had speakers talk about social media already this morning. 2.1 billion of us now use social media as our primary form of communication. It's a world that's dominated in terms of the collaborative process. And I think what we need to be aware of from our own businesses is how we're adapting to this. Not just from a millennial perspective, but how are we making things work that allows us to bring our businesses into the modern era. Clearly, the writing is on the wall or in hyperspace, wherever you want it. And in this decade now, convergence. That's the big buzzword in the IT circles. And convergence sounds incredibly complex. It literally just means everything is coming to you, wherever you are. One-click discovery. Today, we've reached a stage now where the more things change, the faster things change. Business has changed fundamentally. What's happening now in terms of where we find ourselves is in a world of opportunity, but we need to decipher it. We need a successful formula, a new formula for thinking about where our life goes. And if you did an MBA, and you always know when someone's got an MBA, because they tell you normally within the first 30 seconds. Even if you did an MBA at Harvard or somewhere prestigious, until the end of the 1990s, the essence of what an MBA taught you was quite simple. The formula said, understand your past, modify it marginally for your present, and that, if you're lucky, will give you a sense of future. That worked, ladies and gentlemen, in a world that operated a whole lot slower than our world does today. In a world that's rapidly changing as much as ours is, it doesn't matter about your past. It doesn't really matter too much about your present. What matters is your point of difference. your point of uniqueness, which, if you're lucky, may give you a sense of future. 200,000 is the net population growth of the planet. People who are born every day versus those who die. The net population factor, that's 200,000 people a day growth around the planet. Monday to Friday, that's 1 million new potential customers. And the people who make those people are still making more of them on Saturdays and Sundays. If you're looking in the wrong place for the answers, we're going to struggle. Most of us look back into the rear-view mirror, drawing on the basis of our experience from a world that has fundamentally altered and gone forever. How do we master all this stuff that's going on? We perhaps need to simplify, we need to smarten up, and we need to be a little bit more specialist or unique or different in terms of what we do. We need leadership, we need policy and procedure, we need all of those things, but we need to simplify them. Everything we do is learned behavior. Like, for example, let's use the example of learning to drive, or anything that we've learned as a skill. You begin at the base of whatever you learn in what psychologists call a state of unconscious incompetence. I don't know what I don't know. At the other end of the scale of driving, well, a Formula One champion up there, a Lewis Hamilton, a Kimi Raikkonen. Conscious excellence is a massive process that we have to go through on the learning curve. So we began learning to drive in a state of unconscious incompetence. I don't know what I don't know. You take some lessons. You become a little bit conscious of your incompetence. I know what I don't know. When you grated the gearbox, stalled the engine a few times while you were learning to drive. But hey, we're humans. Apex predators, top of the food chain. We can master this. And we proved that the day we went for our driving test, when we met an independent expert who was checking only to see that we were conscious and competent, that we knew that which we knew. And when you were rewarded by those words that you heard from your driving instructor or examiner, congratulations, you've passed. Do you remember that? How good it felt the day you passed your driving test. Because you were told by an independent expert that you were indeed conscious and competent. Here's your driver's license. You wanted to tell the world, man, you were super stoked. And good reason for it. The day you passed your driving test, you became the best driver in the world. No, you were doing it by the book. You were stopping the day after you passed your driving test at stop streets. You were indicating, even if you were driving a BMW when you turned up. 2 weeks after you passed your test, you became unconsciously competent. Apex predator. I've got that, do that, bring it on, next! So the scary thing is everybody driving down the beachfront or the riverfront outside us here today, unless they've got an L plate on their car, or passed their test less than 2 weeks ago, everyone out there is totally unconscious. And you see it with people texting on their phones now. We can do that as well as drive. We can even do that under the dashboard in case the cops happen to be around the next corner. Conscious excellence, the experts say, takes 12 to 15,000 hours of conscious dedication and practice. Most of us give up after 2 weeks. So I'm not here to tell you, within this world of difference that we live in now, that you've got to put in the extra hours. I think it would be foolhardy at best. Very few people have become Formula One driving champions for that very reason. But what I do want us to do, when we simplify our lives, is to drop back into the notch of when we were once conscious and when we were competent. Much better to live there than in a state of unconscious competence. If you want change, it requires conscious, competent thought. And what happens when you smarten yourself up? When you become conscious of what you do, you see stuff going on around you. You know the old wives' tales. I don't know who those old wives were, but they were some smart women. Travel broadens the mind. You've looked at the buildings here in Budapest and the journey from the airport in a way that was totally different to your normal commute, because you were broadening your mind, wrapping and creating another dendrite, another memory, thinking about the experience. Our regular commute, we just turn left or right out of home, drive to the office. Same way, same thing every day, getting stuck in traffic, and then moaning about it. How can you moan about traffic if you are the traffic? You need to create some kind of magnificent symphony in your own business. And the future is not just going to happen. The past has gone forever. The present didn't last as long as we thought it would. The future's already here. Things are going to happen that will radically change everything. Let's not dwell in the past, thinking about the old stuff. We're cruising, we're on cruise control. Let's take back control of the vehicle. Conscious competence, step up a gear and look to perform better. This is a world of change in which we live. It is remarkable. What we need to do is break that routine. Find a new way to work. When you go back to work Monday morning, drive a new way, commute a different way. Force yourself to change. Here's something you can do tonight. Brush your teeth with your other hand. Assuming you aren't going to brush your teeth tonight. Brushing your teeth with your other hand gets you two distinct things occurring. The first thing is you'll get cleaner teeth, because until now you've just been doing it unconsciously. You're actually going to clean your teeth better with your other hand, so there's a bargain immediately. But the second thing is much more important. According to an American study that came out of this about 9 and 10 weeks ago, it actually sparks new learning patterns in your brain, which I call conscious thinking. It takes about 10 days. It's going to feel so weird when you brush your teeth with the other hand. It's going to take you about 10 days to make it feel natural. And then you've got to swap back again, and you'll see your brain goes, whoa, can't get into that. It doesn't have to be dramatic, the change that you make. It's just got to be different. If you don't remember the day you passed your driving test, do you remember the day you got this job? Or started your company? Do you remember that day? How good it felt? I got the new job, man! I've started my business! Do you remember that day? Anyone wake up feeling that way this morning? What changed? Everything. And you didn't. We've got to pull ourselves into a new conscious set of thinking where we start to see the world in full, glorious technicolor, not just take the old stuff for granted. Wow. New world out there. New opportunity. The challenge of change. It's kind of relentless. It's about us waking up much more than Brexit or anything else that's going on around. It's about us being conscious. Thank you very much indeed.